The empty mansion. Jonathan Pierce stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his penthouse, gazing at the city lights that sparkled like fallen stars. At 43, he had amassed more wealth than most people dreamed of in a lifetime. His investment firm managed billions, his name appeared on Forbes lists, and his art collection alone was insured for 8 figures. But on nights like this, the vastness of his empty home echoed with a truth money couldn't silence. He swirled the aged whiskey in his crystal tumbler, a gift from a business partner who didn't know him well enough to realize Jonathan preferred bourbon. That was the story of his life, surrounded by expensive things chosen by people who barely knew him. The phone call from Dr. Whitman earlier that day still reverberated in his mind. "I'm sorry, Jonathan. The latest treatment wasn't successful either. Your condition remains unchanged." The doctor's voice had been gentle but clinical. After 7 years of experimental treatments, specialists across 3 continents, and procedures that cost more than some people's homes, the verdict remained the same. Jonathan Pierce would never father children. He set down his glass harder than intended, the sound sharp in the silent apartment. In his professional life, obstacles were merely puzzles to solve. He'd built his fortune by turning problems into opportunities, but his body had defied every attempt at negotiation, every medical intervention, every miracle promised by doctors eager to help the wealthy man who could afford any treatment. "Sir?" Thomas, his house manager, appeared at the doorway. "Miss Reynolds called about tomorrow's foundation meeting. She wanted to confirm you'll be attending the school renovation project launch." The Pierce Foundation was Jonathan's attempt at legacy. If he couldn't have children to leave his wealth to, he could at least ensure his name lived on through charitable works. "Tell her I'll be there," he replied, not turning from the window. After Thomas left, Jonathan walked through his home, his footsteps echoing on marble floors. 5 bedrooms, each professionally designed, stood pristine and untouched. One he'd once imagined might have been a nursery. Now it housed rare first editions he rarely read. He paused at a photo of his parents. They had died in a car accident when he was 30, before his diagnosis. His mother had always talked about grandchildren. "You'll be such a wonderful father someday, Jonathan," she'd say. The memory twisted like a knife. His phone buzzed with messages from women he'd casually dated. None had lasted. He'd ended relationships before they became serious enough to discuss children. It seemed kinder than watching their faces fall when he revealed his condition, than seeing the mental calculations as they decided whether he was worth the compromise. In the home gym, he pushed himself through a punishing workout, as if physical pain might distract from the emotional wound that never healed. Afterward, he reviewed acquisition documents until the words blurred together. Work had become his relationship, his child, his purpose. The next morning, he dressed impeccably in a custom suit, armor for the day ahead. His driver, Marcus, waited with the Bentley. "Good morning, Mr. Pierce," Marcus said, opening the door. "Morning," Jonathan replied, sliding into the leather interior. "We're going to Westside Elementary." "The foundation project, sir?" "Yes." Jonathan checked his emails, already retreating behind his professional facade. "I need to make an appearance, say a few words, shake some hands." What he didn't say was how much he dreaded these events. The children's faces, their innocent curiosity, their futures stretching before them, it all reminded him of what he would never have. As the car navigated morning traffic, Jonathan prepared his standard philanthropist speech. He would be charming, generous, briefly available. Then he would return to his empty mansion, to the silence that wealth couldn't fill, to the life he'd built around an absence he could never resolve. Little did he know that fate had finally tired of his carefully constructed solitude. At Westside Elementary, amid rubble and renovation plans, waited the catalyst that would shatter every wall he'd built around his heart. Sparks among ruins, the renovation site at Westside Elementary looked like organized chaos. Construction equipment dotted the playground, and a temporary fence surrounded what would become the new Science and Arts Wing, a $3.5 million gift from the Pierce Foundation. As Jonathan stepped from his car, camera flashes greeted him. He smiled automatically, the expression practiced but hollow. "Mr. Pierce." "Over here!" The school principal, a short man with enthusiastic gestures, hurried toward him. "We're so honored you could attend in person. The children have prepared a small presentation." Jonathan nodded, following the principal through the construction zone. A small stage had been set up with rows of folding chairs facing it. School board members and local officials waited. eager to be photographed with the benefactor. He was halfway through his standard speech about investing in future generations when a commotion at the back caught his attention. A woman in paint-splattered jeans and a faded blue work shirt was arguing with one of the site managers. "The plans clearly show the art room windows facing north for natural light," she insisted, pointing at blueprints spread across a makeshift table. "This orientation will put them facing west. The afternoon glare will make the space unusable for painting." The construction manager looked irritated. "Ma'am, changing the orientation now would set us back weeks and cost thousands." Jonathan paused mid-sentence, distracted by the interruption. The audience turned to look at the source of the disturbance. The woman noticed the sudden attention and glanced up, momentarily meeting Jonathan's gaze across the distance. She didn't look apologetic. If anything, she seemed annoyed at the ceremony interrupting her more important discussion. "Perhaps we could continue the presentations inside," the principal suggested nervously. Jonathan handed the microphone to a nearby assistant. "Actually, I'd like to see what the issue is." He walked toward the disagreement, curious despite himself. Up close, he noticed details he'd missed from a distance. The woman's dark curly hair was pulled back in a hasty ponytail, tendrils escaping around her face. Her hands were those of someone who created things, slightly calloused with traces of color beneath her fingernails, and her eyes, a deep amber brown, regarded him with none of the deference he typically encountered. "Mr. Pierce," the construction manager began, "everything is under control." "I'm Olivia Nichols," the woman interrupted, extending her hand. "Art teacher. And everything is not under control. These plans have been altered from what was approved by the curriculum committee." Jonathan shook her hand, noting her firm grip. "Jonathan Pierce, tell me about the windows." For the next 15 minutes, Jonathan found himself engaged in a detailed discussion about light requirements for visual arts, the psychological impact of natural lighting on student creativity, and the technical aspects of reorienting the wing's design. Olivia spoke with passion but also precision, citing research studies and architectural principles. "You've clearly done your homework, Ms. Nichols," Jonathan said when she finished. "Just Olivia," she corrected. "And yes, I have. These kids deserve spaces designed for actual learning, not just for looking good in press photos." The implied criticism wasn't lost on Jonathan. "Are you suggesting my foundation is more concerned with publicity than functionality?" Olivia's expression softened slightly. "No, I'm suggesting that sometimes decisions get made by people who don't have to live with the consequences." She tapped the blueprints. "You don't teach in rooms with blinding afternoon sun making it impossible to see color values correctly." Instead of feeling offended, Jonathan was intrigued. People rarely spoke to him with such directness. "How long would the reorientation take?" he asked the construction manager. 2 weeks minimum, and about $50,000 in additional costs. Jonathan considered for a moment. "Make the change. I want this facility to work for the people who'll actually use it." Relief washed over Olivia's face, quickly replaced by suspicion. "Just like that?" "Just like that," Jonathan confirmed. "Although I would appreciate a tour of the existing art facilities, to better understand what we're improving upon." The principal appeared delighted at this development, but Olivia looked like she'd rather be anywhere else. "Fine," she said, "but I have a class in 20 minutes." As they walked through the aging school building, Jonathan observed how students called out to Olivia by name, how she knew each of them. In her classroom, a cramped space with insufficient storage and faded inspirational posters, he saw student work that revealed genuine talent, nurtured by skilled teaching. "You've accomplished a lot with limited resources," he said, examining a wall of self-portraits. "That's teaching in public schools," Olivia replied, organizing supplies for her next class. "We make do. Not everyone has unlimited funds to throw at problems." "Is that what you think I do?" Olivia paused, studying him with unexpected intensity. "I think you mean well, Mr. Pierce, but there's a difference between writing checks and understanding what a community needs." Students began filing into the classroom, curious about the unfamiliar man in the expensive suit. Jonathan felt suddenly out of place in this world of creativity and controlled chaos. "Thank you for the tour," he said formally. Olivia nodded, already shifting her attention to her arriving students. "Thank you for listening about the windows. As Jonathan left the building, he found himself replaying their conversation. Her criticism had been direct but not unkind, and more importantly, it had been honest. When was the last time someone had spoken to him as a person, rather than a wallet or a potential business connection? Back in his car, he made an impulsive decision. Marcus, contact the foundation office. I want to schedule regular site visits during this renovation. Weekly. Yes, sir, Marcus replied, surprise evident in his voice. Any particular reason? Jonathan watched the school recede in the rear window. Let's just say I want to make sure we get the windows right. For the first time in months, he felt a spark of genuine interest in something beyond his financial empire. Whether it was the project itself or the straight-talking art teacher who challenged him, he wasn't ready to examine too closely. Walls of Glass, the renovation project, had been underway for 6 weeks, and Jonathan's Thursday afternoon visits had become a fixture in his schedule. Each time he arrived with less ceremony, the suit and tie giving way to more casual attire, the entourage of assistants dwindling until he often came alone. Today, he walked through the half-finished art wing, appreciating how the north-facing windows were taking shape. Sunlight filtered through the construction tarps, creating patterns on the concrete floors. He found Olivia where he expected her, clipboard in hand, scrutinizing the installation of custom storage cabinets. The finish is wrong, she was telling a contractor. We specified water-resistant laminate for these surfaces. Art rooms get wet, Jonathan approached, noting how comfortable she looked amid the construction chaos. Fighting another battle for quality, I see. Olivia turned, her initial stern expression softening slightly when she recognized him. Jonathan, I didn't know you were coming today. The transition from Mr. Pierce to his first name had happened gradually over their weekly interactions. Each conversation had chipped away at the formality between them, revealing glimpses of the people behind their professional facades. I brought lunch, he said, holding up a paper bag. Nothing fancy. Sandwiches from that deli you mentioned last week. Olivia checked her watch. I have 20 minutes before my next class. They found a quiet spot in what would become the sculpture garden, sitting on makeshift benches of stacked lumber. Jonathan passed her a sandwich wrapped in brown paper. Turkey and avocado, he said. No mayo, extra mustard. You remembered, she remarked, surprise evident in her voice. Jonathan unwrapped his own sandwich. I remember most things you say, Olivia. Their conversations over the weeks had evolved from project specifics to broader topics, art history, education policy, even personal philosophies. Jonathan had learned about Olivia's background, raised by her grandmother after her parents' divorce, working through college on scholarships, choosing teaching over more lucrative careers in commercial art. In turn, he'd shared more about himself than he had with anyone in years. The kiln installation is scheduled for next week, Olivia said between bites. I've been waiting 5 years for a proper ceramics setup. The old one looked dangerous, Jonathan recalled. All those exposed wires? We may do, she shrugged. That's what we always make do, he finished for her. Your life motto? Olivia smiled, and Jonathan felt that now familiar warmth in his chest. Over these weeks, he'd found himself thinking about her at unexpected moments, during board meetings, while reviewing contracts in the quiet of his home. I've been meaning to ask, she said, her tone shifting to something more serious. Why are you so involved in this project? Most donors make an appearance at the groundbreaking. Maybe the ribbon cutting. You're here every week, getting dusty and dealing with contractor disputes. Jonathan considered his answer carefully. I suppose I needed something real in my life. Something beyond spreadsheets and acquisitions. And a school renovation project qualifies as real? It's more than that, he met her gaze. It's about creating something that matters. And maybe it's about the company. The moment hung between them, charged with unspoken meaning. Olivia looked away first. There's a faculty art show next Friday evening, she said, changing the subject. Nothing elaborate, just teachers displaying their work. I have a few pieces in it. I'd like to see that, Jonathan replied too quickly. Olivia nodded, gathering the remains of her lunch. 7 o'clock. Wear something that won't make the history teacher feel inadequate. After she left for her class, Jonathan remained, watching workers install ceiling beams. His phone buzzed with messages from his office, urgent matters requiring his attention. For the first time in his career, he let them wait. The faculty art show was held in the school gymnasium, transformed by strategic lighting and portable display panels. Jonathan arrived at 7:15, deliberately late to avoid making an entrance. He wore dark jeans and a simple button-down shirt, attire that felt foreign after years of designer suits. He found Olivia's display in a corner, a series of landscapes that captured familiar local scenes with unexpected perspective and emotion. One in particular caught his attention, the city skyline at sunset but painted from a child's viewpoint, looking up with wonder rather than across with familiarity. "What do you think?" Olivia appeared beside him, dressed more formally than he'd ever seen her in a simple dark blue dress. "They're beautiful," he said honestly, "especially this one. It makes me see something familiar as if for the first time. That's the highest compliment an artist can receive." She smiled, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear. "I'm glad you came." They moved through the exhibition together, Olivia introducing him to colleagues without emphasizing his donor status. For once he was just Jonathan, not the wealthy benefactor, not the business tycoon. The simplicity of it felt like freedom. Later they stood in the parking lot, the evening air cool around them. "Would you like to get coffee?" Jonathan asked impulsively. "Or dinner? There's a good Italian place nearby." Olivia hesitated. "Jonathan, what are we doing here? Having a conversation about dinner options? You know what I mean." Her expression was serious. "You're a billionaire philanthropist. I'm a public school art teacher who argues with you about window placements. This friendship, or whatever it is, doesn't make sense on paper." Jonathan took a step closer. "Maybe that's why it feels more authentic than anything else in my life right now." She studied his face. "I don't fit into your world. Maybe I'm tired of my world," he replied. "Maybe I want something real. Something that can't be bought or negotiated into existence." Olivia's expression softened. "Dinner, then. But I'm driving, and we're going to my favorite place. Not somewhere with crystal stemware." Her favorite place turned out to be a small Vietnamese restaurant with plastic tables and the best pho Jonathan had ever tasted. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing effortlessly. For the first time in years, Jonathan felt truly present, not thinking about the next meeting or checking his phone every few minutes. As they walked back to their cars, a comfortable silence fell between them. "Olivia," he said finally, "there's something I should tell you." She turned to him, her expression open. "What is it?" The words he needed to say pressed against his chest, held back by years of practiced concealment. His medical condition, his inability to father children, it had become his most closely guarded secret, the reason he kept people at a distance. He began, then faltered. The restaurant's neon sign cast a soft glow on her face, and he realized with sudden clarity that he was falling in love with her. The thought terrified him. "I've really enjoyed tonight," he said instead. Olivia's smile suggested she knew he'd changed course mid-sentence. "Me too," she said simply. "Same time next Thursday at the construction site?" "I'll be there," he promised, watching as she drove away, carrying with her the words he couldn't yet bring himself to say. Back in his empty mansion, Jonathan stood at his familiar window. But the city lights below seemed different somehow, full of possibility rather than isolation. The wall he'd built around his heart had developed a significant crack, and he wasn't sure whether to repair it or let it crumble entirely. The impossible news 2 months later, Jonathan sat in his office overlooking the financial district, attempting to focus on quarterly projections. Instead, his thoughts kept drifting to the previous evening, dinner at Olivia's modest apartment, her homemade risotto, the way she'd curled against him on the sofa afterward. Their relationship had progressed with a natural rhythm that surprised him. No strategic negotiations, no careful image management, just two people gradually discovering each other. They'd shared dinners, long walks through city parks, and conversations that often lasted until dawn. He'd laughed more in these months than in the previous decade. Last night had been different, though. Their relationship had shifted from friendship to something undeniably romantic, culminating in their first kiss as she walked him to the door. The memory of it still lingered, but so did the weight of his unspoken secret. His assistant's voice interrupted through the intercom. "Mr. Pierce, Dr. Whitman's office is calling." "They say it's urgent," Jonathan frowned. He wasn't due for his annual checkup for another month. "Put them through." "Mr. Pierce," Dr. Whitman's familiar voice came through the line. I need to see you as soon as possible. Today, if you can manage it. A cold knot formed in Jonathan's stomach. Has something shown up in my blood work? No, nothing concerning. But I've received some information that pertains directly to your case. I'd prefer to discuss it in person. 3 hours later, Jonathan sat in the doctor's office, the tasteful decor and soft lighting designed to put patients at ease. It wasn't working. Dr. Whitman entered carrying a thick file. In 15 years as Jonathan's physician, he had always projected calm competence. Today, he seemed almost excited. "Thank you for coming on such short notice," the doctor said, taking a seat. "I've received information from the research team at Uppsala University that's directly relevant to your condition." Jonathan steeled himself. "Another experimental treatment?" "Not exactly." Dr. Whitman opened the file. "They've been tracking outcomes for patients who underwent the same procedure you did 7 years ago. As you know, it was classified as unsuccessful in your case." "I remember," Jonathan said dryly. "It appears the initial assessment may have been premature for some patients." The doctor looked up from his notes. 3 men who were categorized as non-responders have recently fathered children naturally. The Swedish team believes the treatment may have had a delayed effect that our testing protocols weren't designed to detect. Jonathan stared, the words not fully registering. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying that based on this new data, there's a possibility, not a certainty but a possibility, that your condition may have improved without our knowledge." Dr. Whitman leaned forward. "I'd like to run a new panel of tests using the updated protocols." The next week passed in a blur of medical appointments, tests, and anxious waiting. Jonathan told no one, not even Olivia, unwilling to nurture hope that might be crushed. They continued their regular meetings at the school construction site, now nearing completion, but he felt distant, preoccupied. "You're somewhere else today," Olivia observed as they inspected the finished art room, its north-facing windows bathing the space in perfect, even light. "Just work stress," he lied, hating the distance the secret created between them. She didn't press, another quality he cherished about her. She gave him space when he needed it without taking his withdrawal personally. When Dr. Whitman finally called with the results, Jonathan was alone in his home office. "The tests show significant improvement," the doctor said, his voice carrying a note of amazement. "Not just marginal changes, your counts are within normal range. It's not something we would have detected without specifically looking for it." Jonathan gripped the phone tightly. "Are you telling me I could father children?" "Based on these results, yes. It's not guaranteed, of course. Conception involves many factors, but the physical impediment we've been treating appears to have resolved itself. The delayed effect of the treatment seems to have worked exactly as the Uppsala team described." After hanging up, Jonathan stood motionless, overwhelmed by possibilities that had been closed to him for so long. A future he'd forced himself to stop imagining suddenly stretched before him. His first thought was of Olivia. He needed to tell her everything. That evening, he invited her to dinner at his home for the first time. His housekeeper had prepared the meal and then discreetly disappeared, leaving them alone in the formal dining room that had never before felt so intimidating. "This is quite a place," Olivia said, looking around at the high ceilings and expensive art. "It feels like a museum." "It's never really felt like home," Jonathan admitted. "More like a very comfortable hotel I never check out of." They made small talk through the first course, Jonathan growing increasingly tense as the moment of truth approached. Finally, over dessert, Olivia set down her fork. "Something's been bothering you for days," she said directly. "If you've changed your mind about us, I'd rather know now." "It's nothing like that," he assured her quickly. "It's something I should have told you weeks ago, but I was afraid." Her expression softened. "Afraid of what?" Jonathan took a deep breath. "For the past 15 years, I've been unable to father children. A medical condition, the details aren't important, but I've tried every treatment available. Seen specialists around the world. Nothing worked." Olivia's face registered surprise, then compassion. "Jonathan, that doesn't—" He held up his hand. "Please, let me finish. This condition, it's why I've avoided serious relationships. It seemed unfair to expect someone to accept that limitation." "That should have been their choice to make," she said quietly. "I know that now." He reached across the table for her hand. "But there's more. Last week, my doctor discovered that one of the treatments may have worked after all, just much more slowly than expected." My latest tests show I might be able to have children after all. Olivia's eyes widened. That's wonderful news, she said, squeezing his hand. But why were you afraid to tell me this? Jonathan struggled to articulate the fear that had gripped him. Because it changes things between us. Before I was a man who couldn't offer you a complete future. Now suddenly there are possibilities, expectations. Jonathan, Olivia interrupted gently. I'm 38 years old. I made peace with the idea that I might never have children years ago. My life is full with my students, my art, my friends. I wasn't dating you for your reproductive potential. The blunt statement startled a laugh from him, breaking the tension. When you put it that way, it sounds ridiculous. It is ridiculous, she agreed, smiling. I care about you because of who you are. Your mind, your heart, the way you listen when I rant about proper lighting for watercolors. Having or not having biological children doesn't change any of that. Relief washed over him. I've been overthinking this. Completely, she confirmed. Though it's nice to know you care enough to overthink it. They moved to the living room, the heavy conversation giving way to lighter topics. As the evening grew late, Olivia curled beside him on the sofa, her head resting on his shoulder. Stay, he said softly. She looked up at him, her expression serious despite her smile. Are you sure? There's no going back from that step. I don't want to go back, Jonathan realized. I want to go forward. With you. Later that night, as Olivia slept beside him, Jonathan watched the gentle rise and fall of her breathing. For the first time, his vast home didn't echo with emptiness. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future filled with possibilities he'd forced himself to forget. Neither of them could have predicted just how quickly those possibilities would become reality. Neither of them knew that at that very moment, against all statistical probabilities, life had already begun its miraculous journey not once, but twice, beyond what money can buy. The morning sickness started 3 weeks later. Olivia initially dismissed it as a stomach bug, but when it persisted, Jonathan insisted she see a doctor. It's probably nothing, she said as they sat in the waiting room of her physician's office. Maybe I'm just allergic to fancy cuisine. My body's more accustomed to teacher's lounge coffee and vending machine snacks. Jonathan squeezed her hand, his attempt at a reassuring smile not quite masking his concern. Since their night together, something had shifted between them. A deepening connection neither had articulated but both felt acutely. When Dr. Fowler called them both into her office after the examination, Jonathan's heartbeat quickened. Doctors didn't usually involve partners for routine stomach bugs. Well, I've found the cause of your symptoms, Dr. Fowler said, looking at her clipboard, then up at Olivia with a smile. You're pregnant. The words hung in the air. Olivia's grip on Jonathan's hand tightened. Are you certain? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Quite certain, the doctor confirmed, based on hormone levels about 6 weeks along. I'd like to do an ultrasound to confirm everything looks normal. Jonathan felt as though the room were spinning. 6 weeks it had happened that very first night. The treatment that had taken 7 years to work had succeeded immediately with Olivia. The ultrasound technician prepared the equipment while Olivia changed into a gown. Jonathan stood beside the examination table, still processing the news. When Olivia emerged from the changing room, her expression was a complex mixture of shock and wonder. Are you okay? He asked softly. I don't know, she admitted. I had convinced myself this would never happen for me. I'm still catching up to the reality. The technician applied gel to Olivia's abdomen and began moving the wand across her skin. The room filled with a rhythmic whooshing sound. There's your baby's heartbeat, the technician said, pointing to the screen. Jonathan stared at the tiny, flickering pulse, a life they had created together. Emotion overwhelmed him. Joy, terror, gratitude, disbelief. The technician moved the wand slightly. Oh, she exclaimed. Look at that. She adjusted some settings and pointed again. See these 2 separate areas? Each with its own heartbeat, too? Olivia whispered. Twins, the technician confirmed. Fraternal twins, by the look of it. 2 separate amniotic sacs. Jonathan steadied himself against the examination table. Twins. After 15 years of believing he would never be a father, he was now expecting 2 children. The statistical improbability of it was staggering. I'll give you 2 a moment, the technician said, recognizing their need to absorb the news privately. When the door closed, Olivia looked up at Jonathan, tears streaming down her face. "Twins," she repeated. "Jonathan, what are we going to do?" He knelt beside her, taking her hands in his. "Whatever you want to do," he said earnestly. "This is your body, your life. I'll support any decision you make." Olivia studied his face. "And if I want to have them? If I want us to be parents? Then I would be the happiest man alive," he said, his voice breaking. "But Olivia, this doesn't have to change anything between us unless we want it to." "I'm not expecting—" "Jonathan," she interrupted, placing a finger against his lips. "Stop planning for worst-case scenarios. That's not what this is." She took a deep breath. "I love you. I think I have for months now. This isn't how I imagined telling you, but here we are." The words washed over him like a benediction. "I love you too," he replied, the truth of it resonating through his entire being. "More than I thought possible." The next 5 months transformed their lives in ways neither could have anticipated. The school renovation was completed ahead of schedule, earning architectural awards for its innovative design. Jonathan restructured his work commitments, delegating more responsibility to his management team to free up time. Olivia continued teaching through her second trimester, her students delightedly following the progress of her growing belly. They decided to renovate Olivia's apartment rather than have her move into Jonathan's mansion, a compromise that surprised his social circle but felt right to them both. The home that had once seemed too small for one now expanded to embrace a family of 4, with Jonathan adding a studio space for Olivia's art and converting the spare bedroom into a nursery. As Olivia's due date approached, they found themselves awake late one night, arranging and rearranging furniture in the newly painted nursery. 2 cribs stood against the wall beneath a mural Olivia had created, a whimsical forest scene with animals hidden among the trees. "What if I'm terrible at this?" Jonathan asked suddenly, adjusting a crib for the 3rd time. "I had distant parents who left most of my upbringing to nannies. I have no model for how to be a good father." Olivia eased herself into the rocking chair, her hand resting on her rounded belly. "And I had a grandmother who worked 3 jobs to raise me after my parents left. Neither of us has the perfect family blueprint. We'll figure it out together." "But you're a natural with children," he pointed out. "I've seen you with your students. You know how to connect with them, how to encourage them." "That's different," she said. "I send them home at the end of the day. Parenting is constant, but Jonathan, the fact that you're worried about being a good father already tells me you'll be one." He knelt beside her chair, placing his hand beside hers to feel the baby's movements. "I never thought I'd have this chance," he said quietly. "Even after Dr. Whitman told me it might be possible, I didn't really believe it." "Some gifts arrive when you've stopped looking for them," Olivia replied, covering his hand with hers. "Like us." The twins, a boy and a girl, arrived 3 weeks early on a snowy February morning. After 16 hours of labor, Olivia gave birth naturally with Jonathan by her side, alternating between awestruck silence and words of encouragement. When the nurse placed his daughter in his arms, 5 pounds, 6 ounces of perfection with a tuft of dark hair, Jonathan felt a love so profound it seemed to reorganize his cellular structure. His son followed 2 minutes later, slightly smaller but with a stronger cry. "They're perfect," he whispered, unable to take his eyes off their tiny faces. "What shall we name them?" Olivia asked, exhausted but radiant. They had discussed various options but made no final decisions, wanting to see their children first. Looking at his daughter's delicate features, Jonathan thought of his grandmother, a woman of quiet strength and endless compassion. "Eleanor," he suggested. "After my grandmother. We could call her Ellie." Olivia smiled. "Eleanor," she repeated, testing the name. "It's beautiful." She gazed at their son, who had quieted and was blinking up at them with solemn curiosity. "And for him, what about Thomas?" "After my grandfather?" "Eleanor and Thomas," Jonathan said, the names settling around them like a blessing. "Our family." The word family, once so painful to contemplate, now filled him with indescribable joy. 6 months later, Jonathan stood in the doorway of the nursery, watching as Olivia sang softly to the twins before bedtime. Ellie was already asleep, her tiny fists curled beside her head, while Thomas fought drowsiness, determined not to miss anything. The past months had been a blur of midnight feedings, diaper changes, first smiles, and a depth of exhaustion Jonathan had never known existed. His business associates were baffled by his transformed priorities. The mogul who once took calls at midnight now refused meetings that interfered with his time with the twins. Some mornings, he would wake before dawn and stand over their cribs watching them breathe, overwhelmed by gratitude so intense it brought tears to his eyes. Other days, he and Olivia would collapse on the sofa after finally getting them to sleep. Too tired to speak but reaching for each other's hands, partners in this beautiful chaos. Tonight, as Olivia finished her lullaby, she looked up and caught him watching. Her smile, tired but content, warmed him from within. "They're finally down," she whispered, carefully rising from the rocking chair. They tiptoed from the nursery, leaving the door slightly ajar. In the living room, Jonathan pulled her into his arms, breathing in the scent of her hair, now mingled with baby shampoo and the indefinable sweetness of their children. "Marry me," he said softly. Olivia leaned back to see his face. "What?" "Marry me," he repeated, more certain than he'd ever been of anything. From his pocket, he withdrew a small velvet box containing a ring that had belonged to his grandmother, a simple diamond surrounded by sapphires. "Not because of the twins, but because I want to spend every day of my life with you. Because you showed me what truly matters. Because you made me brave enough to love again." Tears filled Olivia's eyes as she took the box. "You know I don't care about expensive things," she began. "It was my grandmother's," he explained. "The only thing of real value she left me. She would have loved you." Olivia opened the box, her breath catching. "It's beautiful. Is that a yes?" he asked, suddenly nervous. Her answer was to kiss him, the ring box still clutched in her hand. "Yes," she whispered against his lips. 1,000 times yes. From the nursery came a soft cry, then another, the twins awakening, as if sensing the momentous decision their parents had just made. "Perfect timing," Olivia laughed, sliding the ring onto her finger. Jonathan smiled, taking her hand as they returned to the nursery together. This was his life now: interrupted sleep, constant needs, endless responsibilities, and he wouldn't trade it for all the silent luxury in the world. Standing over the cribs, watching Olivia lift Ellie while he reached for Thomas, Jonathan reflected on the journey that had brought him here. From empty mansion to overflowing apartment, from isolation to connection, from a man who believed his greatest limitation would define his life to a father whose heart expanded daily with love he never knew he was capable of feeling. Some might call it luck, others destiny. Jonathan preferred to think of it as life's most valuable lesson, that true wealth couldn't be measured in bank accounts or business acquisitions, but in the miracle of family found when all hope seemed lost. As Thomas settled against his shoulder, tiny fingers curling into his shirt, Jonathan knew with absolute certainty that he was, at last, the richest man in the world.